Good morning. It is Monday, April 27th, and today we are going to graph trigonometric functions with different amplitudes, vertical shifts, and frequencies using amp, sine, freq, shift, and knowing the four waves. So what's new for today's lesson is that we're going to be incorporating different frequencies, whereas the previous two lessons, we just worked in different amplitudes and vertical shifts. So to do this, we need to know our amp, sine, freq, shift, and we need to know our four waves. So we're going to start with our little song for amp, sine, freq, shift. 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 So again, amp, sine, freq, shift. That's what the equation of a trigonometric or sinusoidal function looks like. It's the amp, then the sine, the cosine, then the frequency, then the x, then the vertical shift. So you need to know what all those components mean, and you have to know where they fall within this. Amp, sine, freq, shift is the key to all this. Let me just put the guitar down. Now, beyond that, we need to know what our four waves look like. So again, let's take a look at our four waves. Positive sine and negative sine both start at the midline. Positive sine goes up first, negative sine goes down first. Cosine and negative cosine don't start at the midline. Positive cosine starts at the max. Negative cosine starts at the min. Every wave is 5 points, and it starts and ends at the same point. Positive sine starts and ends at the middle. Negative sine starts and ends at the middle. Positive cosine starts and ends at the top. Negative cosine starts and ends at the bottom. So let's put it all together now, and let's take a look at some examples. Before that, just quickly, I know we've been doing this every day, but let's just talk about the steps to graphing. We're going to use amp, sine, freq, shift to determine the amplitude, sine or cosine, positive or negative, frequency, and the shift. Shift is another word for midline. Once we have the frequency, we're going to use this little formula here, period equals 2 pi over the frequency to find the period, because we're going to need that. Once I get that information, I draw in the midline and make dashes for my max and my min on my y-axis. For my x-axis, I'm going to make 4 dashes, and I'm going to put the period at the end of the 4th dash. Once I have all that, I'm going to see which curve it was, and I'm going to sketch it. And that's it. So let's skip number 1. Let's do number 1. So let me just okay. Amp, sine, freq, x, shift. So my amp is what's in front of sine or cosine. What's in front of sine or cosine? 1. It's positive sine. Since it says sine and there's no negative, My frequency is between the sine and the x. What's between the sine and the x? 2. So I know in the previous 2 lessons, our frequency was always 1. Not going to be the case here. My shift is what comes after the x. What comes after the x? Nothing. So my shift is 0. Now I need my period, which is 2 pi over the frequency, which is 2 pi over 2, which is pi. So I now put my information onto my grid for my y-axis. My midline, my shift is at 0. The amplitude is 1, so I'm going to go 1 up from the midline and 1 down from the midline. That's 0, 1, negative 1. My x-axis, I make 4 dashes. I like to skip a box. You don't have to. And my period goes at the end of the 4th dash. In the previous lessons, my period was always 2 pi, but that's not going to always be the case depending on what the frequency is. Now that I have that, I'm going to look at my wave. It's a positive sine. So positive sine starts at the midline, then goes up. So I'm going to start at the midline, then go up, midline, down, midline. And there it is. That's it. All right, it's the same thing we did yesterday, except now, whatever the period is, I mean, this was the case yesterday as well, but whatever the period is, it's not going to always be 2 pi. I have to do 2 pi over the frequency. And again, the frequency is between the sine or cosine and the x. Once I have my period, that's what goes at the end of the 4th dash. Number 2 is going to be a little algebraic twist on number 2. Let's go blue. I feel like I don't go blue enough. I'm so excited that I have purple in this thing. But blue's cool too. All right, so we've got amp, sine, freq, x, shift. Amp, sine, freq, x, shift. It's a great song, isn't it? Amp is what's in front of the sine or cosine. My amplitude is 2. It's not negative 2. Amplitude is always positive. It's a distance. Sine or cosine, positive or negative, it's negative cosine. That's where the negative comes into play. This negative is not the amplitude. It's telling me if the sine or cosine is positive or negative. After the sine or cosine is the freq. So the freq is a half. And then my shift is nothing in this example, since there's nothing after the x. So I sketch in my midline, my shift, which is 0. My amplitude is 2. So from the midline, I'm going up 2 and down 2. On my x-axis, I make 4 dashes. And I need to find the period to determine what goes at the end of the 4th dash. So it's going to be 2 pi over 1/2. So this goes back to 7th grade algebra. How do you divide by a fraction? Do you remember? I remember. To divide by a fraction, we keep, change, flip. We multiply by the reciprocal, whatever you'd like to call it. And I get, sorry, I got a little messy. And I get 2 pi times 2 is 4 pi. So 4 pi is what goes at the end here. So again, whenever I'm dividing by a fraction, this is just 7th grade algebra, I multiply by the reciprocal, I keep, change, flip, which brought me here, and then from there I get my answer. So that's the hard part. Now it's going to be a negative cosine, so I'm going to look back and see what negative cosine looks like. Negative cosine starts at the bottom and then goes up. So I'm going to start at the bottom and then go up, up, and back down. And that's it. It's good always to write your y-axis values in as well. And that's it. So again, there's a lot of little components to this. Amp sign freq x shift kind of puts all those little components together. And that's it. So we're going to do a couple more examples, and that's it. After that, you're going to practice. Let's take a look at number 3 here. And stay blue. I like blue. Let's make this a little bit bigger. Amp sign freq x shift. I'm going to list my components of amp sign freq x shift. My amp is 3. Sine or cosine, positive or negative. It's positive cosine. Next comes my freq. My frequency is 4. Then comes my shift. My shift is positive 2. Now I also need my period. Period is 2 pi over the frequency. 2 pi over 4 reduces to pi over 2. So on my y-axis, my midline, my shift is 2. So I'm going to draw in my midline. My amplitude is 3. So I'm going to go up 1, 2, 3 from the midline and down 1, 2, 3 from the midline to get my max and my min values. Again, if the amplitude is 3, it does not mean that it's going to be a positive 3 and negative 3. It means from the midline, I'm going up 3 and down 3. X-axis, I make 1, 2, 3, 4 dashes. The period goes at the end of the 4th dash. Now it's a positive cosine. Let's do a fun color. Let's do a new color that we haven't really been dealing with much. I don't like these colors. Oh well, I chose one. Positive cosine starts at the top, then goes down. So, oops. Positive cosine starts at the max, midline, min, midline, max. And there it is. That's it. Let's just do one more. I want to do one more where the frequency is a fraction, just so you see that 7th grade multiplied by the reciprocal again. And then beyond that, it's just about practice. This is a very important lesson. I like this lesson a lot because this incorporates everything. This is really what you need to know to get these questions right in the Regents. There'll be a couple of follow-up lessons after this with the graphs, but to be honest, it doesn't really come up much. This is what comes up. So this is what you need to be prepared for. This is probably tied for the most important lesson in the unit. So let's just see if we can find one more with a fraction. Looks like we found it right here. Let's do deep purple. Amp sign, freq x shift. I want you to list the amp, sine or cosine, freq, shift. I'll give you 30 seconds to do that, and then we'll talk about the period. Okay, amp is what's in front of the sine. Amp is 2. It's negative sine. Freq comes between the sine and the x. Freq is 1/2. Shift comes at the end. Shift is -1. Period is 2 pi over the frequency. So the frequency in this example is 1/2. So to divide by a fraction, we multiply by the reciprocal, keep, change, flip. I want you to try and find the period from here on your own. I'll give you about 20 seconds, then I'll go over it. I want you to find the period to divide 2 pi by 1/2. I would not use the calculator for this, by the way. I would do it by hand. Keep, change, flip. 2 pi times 2 is 4 pi over 1 is 4 pi. So now that I have the information, you know what? I'm going to give you about a minute to a minute and a half. I want you to try and graph from here. Okay. My shift is -1. I always start with my midline, my shift. The amplitude is 2. So from the midline, I'm going up 2 and down 2 to +1 and -3. I make 4 dashes on my x-axis. And again, the reason I make 4 dashes, there's 5 points for every wave. So 0 is 1, and then 2, 3, 4, 5. The period goes at the end of the 4th dash. Now it's a negative sign, so I'm going to look at my wave in case I haven't memorized it already. Negative sign starts at the midline, then it goes down, starts at the midline, then it goes to the minimum, then it goes back to the midline, then it goes to the maximum, then it goes back to the midline. I sketch it in, and that's it. So I can graph trigonometric functions with different amplitudes, vertical shifts, and frequencies. Again, that's what's new for this lesson, using amp sine freq x shift and knowing the 4 waves. Again, amplitude comes in the front, then it's sine or cosine, then it's the frequency, then it's the x, then it's the shift. You do have to know that period is 2 pi over the frequency because you need that when you're graphing. Once you determine your amplitude, sine or cosine, positive or negative, frequency, shift, and period, I'm going to draw in the midline, make dashes at your max and min by using the amplitude to count from the midline. Again, the amplitude is the distance from the midline to the min or max. For my for my x-axis, I make 4 dashes, and the period goes at the end of the 4th dash. Once I have that, I'm going to just use the appropriate curve and sketch it in. Your classwork / homework. Your classwork / homework is to finish graphing sinusoidal functions with frequency. And again, this is tied for the most important lesson in this unit because it incorporates everything we've done so far. So there's basically 2 directions that we're going to go. We're going to graph, and then we're going to write the equations given the graph in a few lessons. but this is definitely, this and that one are the two most important. So if you want to know how to do graphing trig functions, you want to watch this lesson, and then you're going to want to watch the writing equations of sinusoidal functions, because 90% of the unit you're getting through those two lessons. We're going to do a little bit more with graphing the next couple lessons, but in all honesty, it's not the most important. Doesn't come up that much. This is definitely the most important, as well as the writing the equations of sinusoidal functions, which we'll do either at the end of this week or next week. Any questions, reach out to me and reminds. It's been a pleasure, and maybe years from now we'll still be using this video because it's a really important topic, and this lesson is really valuable in understanding how to do it. Have a great day, and again, reach out to me and remind if you have any questions.